Hello. Now we'll talk about overriding. As we have already seen in the last lecture, that class inherit from the another class, right? Has all the functionality of the parent classes, right? So now let's look at what happens when we override the str method in the custom class. Like here we have this custom class, right? We have not implemented the str method. So when we call the str of the object, this will be the so basically this is calling the str method of the object class which person implicitly inherits, right? So now let's override the str method in the person class. Here we have this person class, this is the str method we are overriding. That means we are re-implementing the str method. Now when we say here we are getting the object, and then when we run this str of p, now this likes now it is calling the person class. So basically here we can say that this str method has overridden. Now what happens if we implement the repr method only and still call the str method? What happens there, right? So here we have this person class, we have implemented the repr, right? Now when we call the str, what happens is here we are getting called the repr method. That means it ends up calling the repr method in the person class, even though we did not have the str method defined, right? It is calling the repr method when we call the str method. That's because object delegates str to the repr, right? Which in turns find out in our class. So it's called the repr method, right? We'll see that in an action, right? So here let's discuss that how the inheritance chain work, right? So here we are getting a simple chain. We have this class shape. In this shape we have this two method info and the extended method, right? Now we have this polygon class. In this class we have the info method. Let's run this. Here we are getting the object of the polygon when we call the info of the polygon class, right? When we create the info of the polygon class, what we get? It's calling the info of the polygon class. This is the method is being called. But what if we call the extended info? Because when we run this, because this extended info is not present in the polygon class, so it will call the extended info from their superior class, from their subclass, right? So when we run this, we can see that it has called, this method is being called from their parent class, right? Now let's add some twist to this. So here we have changed our extended info. So here in the extended info, we are also calling the self.info class, right? So when we call the extended info, it returns this, but it also call the self.info, right? So if we call this, it call the info class. So let's run this. Now we have the object when we call p.info. This is the obvious, we are getting the info class from the polygon. But what will happen if we call the extended class? Here we are calling the extended class, right? So when we run this, what we are getting? We are getting this as an output, but it also calling polygon.info call polygon square. That means it is calling self.info. This is what the delegation is, right? So this is the same mechanism that result in str persons class. When we end up calling the repr method in the person class, instead of like when we call the str function, right? It calls the repr method. Why? Because this is how the because internally str method delegates the repr functions, right? In fact, we can see this happens exactly this way. We have this person class, this is the str method, we have the student class, we have the repr method. Let's show this. Here we have this student object. Let's call the str of the student. It called the, because this str is not present in the student, so it called this. Let's call the repr of the student. This called the repr of the student class. Now if we now have str delegated to repr instead, like over here, when we call the str method, it also return the REPR method. So str method also return the REPR method, right? And here we have this student class, and then we have the REPR method, right? Now let's see what happens. So here we have the object of the student class. When we call the str method of the student class, which is not there in this class, so it will call to this str class, which is there in the person class because of the inheritance. When we run this, what happens? First, it will check whether this is there or not. So it will call this one. And this is actually calling the REPR method. Here we can see that this is actually calling the REPR method of the student class, right? When we call the REPR of student. So this is the actually what happening. This is actually what happening when we call the str method, right? So now we know how this str and REPR works, right? And this is it. Thank you very much, Vidya.